Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and here is another vacation mode video, very simple editing. It's just a topic I would like to discuss in more detail. We've talked about this before, but with Hyrule Warriors about to come out in just a few short days here, this is something I'm going to have in mind as I play the game, and I am wondering just how much of this there may be. So, yes, I do believe that there is a remake in the works for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It is a theory, it is a rumor. We've been theorizing on it for many years. There have been a few rumors over the years, and more substantial rumors over the last few months. But this video is not talking about whether it exists or not, just operating under the assumption that there is something like this coming. I look at Hyrule Warriors, and I see several different avenues for this game to expand on the overall lore of the Zelda series, and also set things up for an Ocarina of Time remake where there could be some interesting implications or some interesting hints or connections. So one of the big ones that I've talked about before is that we know that we're going to see a telling of the story of Ganondorf and the Gerudo, and seeing the internal struggles. We're going to see a little bit of that, because we do know that at first the Gerudo are working with Ganondorf, but at some point they switch over. What happens there? But we also know from the memories in Tears of the Kingdom that Ganondorf has two attendants. They are Kotake and Koeme in their youth, in their prime. Now, for those who do not know who these women are, in Ocarina of Time, they are the witches. Now, they're technically working for a different Ganondorf, which is another interesting thing about the events of Tears of the Kingdom and also Age of Imprisonment. The Ganondorf we see is supposedly the original Ganondorf, and the Ganondorf we see in Ocarina of Time, in Twilight Princess, in The Wind Waker, is a different Ganondorf. But we also know what happens at the end of the Age of Imprisonment. There is an imprisoning of Ganondorf, and supposedly, he is under Hyrule for many, many, many years, where different legends take place, including the events of Ocarina of Time. That is the idea. Now, of course, there are some people that think otherwise. They think there is a second founding and all of that, and that's a theory. You're welcome to subscribe to it, but I subscribe to what Nintendo has told us, and that is that this is the beginning of the Kingdom of Hyrule, until proven otherwise, especially because we have this potential connection here where the witches we see from Ocarina of Time could literally be the exact same people that we see in the events of the Imprisoning War, the attendants to Ganondorf. And so we're likely going to see some stories surrounding these characters, and perhaps get some insight as to their personalities and how they interacted with Ganondorf, and how they might respond to his imprisoning and what they'll do next, presumably become witches and age for hundreds of years until the events of Ocarina of Time, which could be a really great connection and setup for this remake I keep theorizing about. But that is just one angle. Another angle that I'm thinking about is Rauru. So Rauru the character, not the town from Zelda 2, we first saw in Ocarina of Time. And I go back to an interview from Nintendo Dream magazine that came out in 2023, where series producer Eiji Aonuma made mention of Rauru, and he wasn't sure people would really know who that character is anymore, referencing the character from Ocarina of Time. This is an interview where they were talking about Tears of the Kingdom, and Rauru from Tears of the Kingdom came up, so they were sort of getting into the whole dynamic of why they came up with the name. But in Age of Imprisonment, we're going to learn more about Rauru from Tears of the Kingdom. He's playing a significant role here, and continuing the train of thought that eventually Ocarina of Time would happen years after the events of the Imprisoning War. This would be the original Rauru, and so we're going to learn more about him and his importance being the first king of Hyrule. And so, with Ocarina of Time, that all of a sudden adds an interesting implication to the name of the Light Sage, Rauru. They're both Light Sages, and maybe he was named Rauru because he was destined to be the Light Sage like the original King of Hyrule. It would be a retcon, but this one I think could be meaningful, and perhaps in a remake that may have some elements reimagined, there could be something with the dialogue or the story that could make mention to this history, which would be a really cool connection there. But then expanding beyond just the Light Sage, we are seeing a tale of the Seven Sages. The Seven Sages we first saw in Ocarina of Time, but now there's a new story of the original Seven Sages. And so that can also offer a lot more context and background story that could prove to be really interesting information that perhaps they may take advantage of in a remake of Ocarina of Time. There could be some mentionings of that, some allusions to the past of the Imprisoning War. But there's a whole other angle to this conversation that has recently come to light. So we've learned the name of this Korok that is allied with the mysterious construct. He's always by his side, Calamo. And we also got a description from Nintendo about this character. He is exploring Hyrule looking for a place to set down his roots. And so there's been a lot of theorizing and speculating that this Korok is actually the Deku Tree, the original Deku Tree. So interestingly, even though this Age of Imprisonment is during the founding of the Kingdom of Hyrule, there is a game that takes place before this point, and that is Skyward Sword. In Skyward Sword, there is no Deku Tree. There is a large tree in the Faron region, but it's not described as a Deku Tree. It does not have a personality, it does not talk, there is no face, there's just a big tree. And from what we've seen of the world of Age of Imprisonment, there is no Hyrule Castle, not the one that we know from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom or other Zelda games, and there is no Deku Tree. So this is a time before there is the Deku Tree, and so we're going to learn about this character, and perhaps he is going to become the Deku Tree. People have even noted that his leaf on his head is very similar to the leaves we see on the Deku Tree in Breath and Tears of the Kingdom. But I think there's actually more to this situation potentially here, because we see that he's closely allied. He hangs out with the mysterious construct. He seems to be best buddies with the mysterious construct, and many are theorizing, and I agree, that this mysterious construct in some way is tied to the hero, Link. What version of Link? There's a lot of debate to be had there. I think odds are it's somehow connected to the Link from Breath and Tears of the Kingdom, but there are other possibilities. Regardless, this mysterious construct seems to carry the spirit of the hero in some way. And so it looks like Calamo builds up a strong friendship with this mysterious construct. And so with that in mind, let's think about that for a moment. If Calamo becomes the Deku Tree, he's going to have a fond memory of this character that has the spirit of the hero. And so through the ages, he's going to look forward to the next coming of the hero, the next Link. And so he's going to have these memories of his best friend from during the Age of Imprisonment, which adds a lot of interesting context when we think about all future interactions we see between Link and the Deku Tree. And this could possibly even add a little bit more context as to why the Kokiri are garbed in green. The Deku Tree being the father of the Kokiri, which we do know eventually become Koroks, perhaps because of his fondness of the hero, he's inspired to have the Kokiri also garbed in green like the hero. It might also explain why he was more willing to take care of Link even though he was not a Kokiri. In Ocarina of Time, the story is that Link is left as a young baby, and the Deku Tree allows him to grow up in this safe haven that is the Kokiri Forest. And actually, another interesting angle to consider with this is that we think about how the Kokiri are not Koroks, but Calamo is a Korok, supposedly maybe the first Korok that becomes the Deku Tree, and we know the Kokiri become Koroks. What if the Deku Tree actually set up this entire environment for young Link in Ocarina of Time to make him feel more at home? What if the Kokiri are only the Kokiri to make Link feel like he has a place, to make him feel like he's not alone? In other words, there could be a new element to our understanding of the Koroks and the Kokiri here, where maybe the Koroks are always Koroks except for during this period of time because the Deku Tree wanted to create a hospitable environment for Link to grow up where he could feel at home, so he made the Kokiri look like kids so they can live aside Link and he can feel more comfortable. And so eventually, many years after the events of Ocarina of Time and the whole Hero of Time era, they revert back to Koroks. And what makes this even more interesting, the only game where we see living Kokiri is Ocarina of Time. This is the only game that has them, so Perhaps there's something to this idea that Deku Tree, who has his memory and fondness of the spirit of the hero, saw this young Link and created a new environment for him to grow up in, so he had the Koroks live as the Kokiri during his lifetime. So I think there's some really interesting potential implications and potential setup that Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment could have for an Ocarina of Time remake, or at least interesting references and implications for the original game. But could there be more? Could there be other elements to the story of Age of Imprisonment that could have even more connections to Ocarina of Time? I am unsure. However, I will say this, and I've mentioned this before, we did see in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity that there were several references with the base game and the DLC setting up a future Zelda game in Tears of the Kingdom. And we've also seen other Zelda games reference potential future games, like in the case of A Link Between Worlds, where there was a Majora's Mask, and then we got Majora's Mask 3D. So I think there's a lot of interesting potential here. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.